All right, we're going to go ahead and get.
We're playing musical chairs if we don't have our nice.
Yeah. Just for everybody, this is a workshop, so it's a lot informal. We don't have the nameplates and stuff, and we're not doing roll call. But we do appreciate everyone coming out. I also would encourage, as Mike's going through this, to ask questions. Part of the workshop format is for it to be a dialogue. And so we also have some people joining via Zoom. And I guess we'll let them know if they have questions. They can go ahead and you could raise your hand on there, but the best thing, I think, you can just also ask the question, right, Mike?
Yeah, I'm fine either way. Dallas is going to try to watch her hand raise. Okay.
But if you raise your hand and you're not getting called on, just go ahead and jump in, and we'll work it that way.
So should we do introductions around the real quick?
We can if you want to. Go ahead.
I'll start. Mike Conger, TPO staff.
Craig Lipke, TPO staff.
Dallas D. Armand, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
James Temple, Sevier County.
Dakota Gentry, City of Alcoa.
Doug Burton, TPO coordinator.
Jim Snow, Knox County Engineering Public Works.
I'm Tom Clabo, City of Knoxville Engineering.
Catherine Baldwin, Anderson County.
Jack Qualls, Loudoun County.
Stacy Morrison, TDOT Planning Manager.
Ekem Amundo Ladson with the North and South RPO, also representing the East Tennessee Development District.
Danielle Myers, Tennessee Vance, Knoxville Commuter Pool.
Yeah. Just mention real quick who's online.
We have a lot of people online, so I'm going to go through the names to prevent chaos. We have Angie Lucky, I'm assuming with TDOT, Brian
Maryville.
Boone. Oh, Angie's with Maryville? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, and Brian with City of Maryville. Garrett Scott, TDOT, Jacob Hoyt, Jordan Rock, TDOT, Kara Greathouse with FHWA, Kevin Stoltenberg, Maryville, Roger Flynn, Oak Ridge, Stephanie Taylor, TDOT, Sonny Defoe, Tina Whitaker with Lakeway, Will Landers, TDOT. Sorry, my things. I think that's it. Okay.
And this is pretty much going to be the Mike Conger show. He's worked really hard on it all week, so I really appreciate him doing that. So I'll just go ahead and turn it over here.
I've been immersed in federal regulations and some background, so I apologize up front for everybody. This is not going to be it's going to be a fairly dry and technical subject, but you guys are the technical committee, so once in a while you have to get your hands dirty with numbers and such. But to kick off, we do have a couple of other items before we get into the performance measures. So first up here, we have the TDOT 10-year plan, which just came out last week. And we did send out a map and a list of projects just from our region that are in the 10-year plan. So this is those projects. Most of these are ones that were in the previous 10-year plan, so there's not a lot of new information here. They've broken them out into sort of 4 different categories. The top 3 are ones already under construction. These include like Alcoa Highway near Cherokee Trail, the I-75 Emory Road diverging diamond, and the I-40 study going on. And then they have the sort of the regular list of 10-year plan projects that have already been in the works so far. I won't go through these one by one, but includes things like Edgemore Road in Anderson County, the Pellissippi Parkway extension. We do have the 2 interchanges on I-40 at Watt Road and Campbell Station on that list, and Loudoun County I-75 widening. So then down at the bottom of here are the more newer projects added this year. There's one in Anderson County. This, to my best of my knowledge, is sort of a greenway connection, pedestrian access to the Aspire Park in Clinton area there. And then also they've added in what we've kind of referred to as the missing link part of Alcoa Highway that we were wondering why it was not on the 10-year plan in previous iterations. So this completes the entire corridor, the segment in Blount County, roughly from, it says Pellissippi Parkway is more like Singleton Station, where the new relocated Alcoa Highway ties in up to the county line, the little river there. And then finally here, we did get awarded one statewide partnership program project. And for Knox County, another sort of missing link, if you look at that corridor, this is the 2-lane section of Level Road from Pellissippi out Cedardale Lane out to Middlebrook Pike. As you guys know, Knox County spent a significant amount of money of local funds to do the pieces to the east, Shad Road, Callahan Road, and once this piece is done, it would complete a 4-lane, kind of a mini bypass from I-40 at Level Road all the way up to I-75 at Callahan. So we're excited to see that project included this round. I know the county has some more discussions with TDOT to finalize the details of that. I guess, Stacy, I'll let you chime in if you have any other information about tenure.
Thank you, Mike. So again, this is considered the draft release of the 10-year plan. So obviously, if they're releasing this, it's all good information. When the final budget is approved by the General Assembly, there'll be a release of the final 10-year plan. We're expecting that by the middle of May. Expectation, like last year, we had the draft about this time, and then the final budget was approved, and there was a few more projects added. So hopefully that will be the case. Depends on what gets approved in the final budget. So that'll be coming soon. We'll be working with the MPO staff to get all that information updated, and those projects that need to be updated in our TIP, we'll have to do those as well. I haven't taken a deep dive yet, Mike. Did any of the projects move one direction or the other? Across the state, there's been a few, so that's something when you see the final one, take a look at that as well. A few projects have moved either up or mainly sooner because they got some additional dollars to actually get them done a little quicker. So
you're talking about the year of implementation. Mm-hmm. They've broken out the years for preliminary engineering, right-of-way, and construction. To my knowledge, these didn't really change other than, the Pellissippi Parkway Extension, of course, was a statewide partnership program award last year to combination of the governments in Blount County to move up right-of-way, which was previously 2032. It's now in 2026.
Right.
Through local funding. And
right.
I don't know if that happened actually last year or, that move of year, but
right.
That is something to point out.
But some things to keep an eye on for when the final one comes out. So thank you.
Are there any questions from any folks about the 10-year plan?
So this is just for information. Only we will not be voting on this obviously today.
No.
In May, will we be expected to vote on this?
Now, these are basically projects that TDOT selected. We don't have direct input on any of this. The 10-year plan projects is something TDOT's taken internally, starting with their first release in 2023. They decided they needed to get a handle on the 900-some projects in the Improve Act and establish an actual fiscally constrained list of projects for the next 10 years that would be implemented. And that was released. Whether or not at some point there may be more direct interaction with MPOs is something that I think we should advocate, that we have some input on the selection of the projects that are not in the 10-year plan that should move into the next iterations. But to this point, TDOT has not directly asked for that.
I have a request for TDOT. And I've said this before, it's kind of my soapbox. I appreciate the choice lanes. I know that there has been some consideration for analysis of reinvigorating the orange route. And I think that needs to have the same priority as the choice lanes. The objective here is to give alternative routes to the traffic that's there now and the anticipated traffic in the future. Looking at choice lanes, we still do not have a different alignment around the Knoxville region until you get to 640. We have one alignment. And for a town that we're anticipated to add, 700,000 people in the next 10 years? Is our number?
I don't think it's that.
10
But-
years.
10 years, not 700,000. Our population right now is 600.
Okay.
So
Whatever it is.
we'll, I mean, I will just say next month, TDOT, we're anticipating TDOT will have presentations at both of our meetings on the I-40 Pell study, which does include analysis of choice lanes and the orange route. So maybe we save that conversation for next month is probably a better time to have
Okay.
go into that.
But I do think the emphasis is on the wrong project. This is in their 10-year plan. It's number 2 on the list.
So that's just the funding for the, well, it's kind of confusing because it's 32 million, but it's, right now it's just studying that and maybe there's some seed money. I don't know what the 32 million exactly means. I don't know.
And
Stacy.
that's a question, you know, like when we used to study alignments, we always had a no-build option, right? And you always had an alternative option. So I guess my ask to TDOT would be to consider, you know, this northern bypass as an alternative to choice lanes as part of the study.
That is part of the study.
So that's part of the study? Okay,
Yeah.
so,
We'll hear, I don't know to what level of detail we'll get into next month, but they are
okay.
planning, like I said, we'll
Thank
nail
you.
that down as we get closer. And then there's anticipated public meetings sometime in June, I think, later part of June. Another round of public meetings on that study. So we'll hear more next month.
All right, I'll give up my mic.
We just have a lot to get through, so I don't want to keep you here. All right. One other quick update, item 2, is just want to make sure everybody's aware that they did release another notice of funding opportunity for the Safe Streets and Roads for All, SS4A. This is the last round under the IIJA, 5 years worth of funding. I mean, this is the 5th and last year of that. We don't know what will happen in the next reauthorization. This is due by May 26th. Just a couple quick slides here, and I'll just briefly cover. I mean, most people are aware of this already. There's 2 different types of grants. You can have a planning and demonstration, or implementation. So far, I think City of Knoxville is the only ones that have received implementation funding out of this, but several folks have done an action plan. And you can do a lot of things with that, and Alcoa is wrapping theirs up, and I know they've hoping to maybe get some projects ready to apply for implementation this round before it ends. There's a lot of examples online. And then, so if you do apply, I suggest really carefully reading the NOFO. There are some new changes this year reflecting the administration goals in Washington now, gearing more towards what they call hard sort of public safety infrastructure. There are some executive orders, of course. You need to dig into the merit criteria. That's very specific what they're looking for and how they're going to rank the projects with. One thing I noted in there is one thing that might help your application is if your fatality rate of your jurisdiction is exceeding a certain threshold. And we can pull the numbers if you guys are interested. If anybody's wanting to apply for funding, we can help you determine that fatality number with the data we have. Just finally here, there are a couple things listed as less favorable things in your application to be aware of. There is a focus at the current administration less on bike ped type of projects, especially if ones that may take away capacity from regular motor vehicle traffic. So just kind of be aware of that in your application. Any questions on that? So if not, we'll move on to the main topic for today, which is the target setting approaches for our next 4-year performance period of federal highway performance measures. This is specific to what PM3 area system performance. So I've got quite a bit. There's several different measures involved in this that we're trying to tackle all today, but we aren't going to try to establish any numbers or targets today. I figured we just go through the process and thought process and some of the potential routes we want to go, and then I would plan to follow up by an email and maybe do a polling that way to kind of get consensus on a direction of a target for each of these, and then come back at the May meeting and see if there's consensus on that and see if we're ready to move forward on adopting actual targets at the May meeting for this. So that's kind of a quick overview. Some background on this. A lot of you are familiar with performance management. It was initiated with the MAP 21 legislation back in 2012 to just bring more transparency to the federal funding programs to make sure they're tracking what's being achieved out there with all the federal funding that's given to the states. And there's 7 national goals, which I don't list here, but things dealing with congestion and environmental and safety. So again, the main thing here is accountability and transparency of the impacts of funding on the actual system performance. So this is all codified in federal regulations, 23 CFR Part 490, and these are the subparts where it establishes each one of these performance measures in detail, how to calculate them and so forth. So these are organized into 3 different performance measurement areas. And I did have a handout, hopefully to help follow along with all this, but I know it's a lot to take in. But what we're talking about today are the PM3 areas here, subpart E, F, G, and H. And these are associated with the funding programs, the National Highway System Preservation Program, NHPP, also the National Highway Freight Program, which I don't think this area has ever received any of those dollars. These dollars come to TDOT, and they pretty much control the pots of money for these funding programs, with the exception now of CMAQ, which I'll get into later. Subpart G is with CMAQ, traffic congestion. Subpart H, CMAQ, the emissions reductions. So I've got slides for more of these moving forward. We're starting the 3rd 4-year performance period for these now. So this performance period will run from 2026 through 2029. The first deadline is for TDOT, and it's October 1st of this year. And we do have several TDOT folks online that can correct me on any of these things that I may misspeak on. But so TDOT establishes their target, and then we have 180 days after that to either support their target or establish our own. So you may ask, why are we kind of jumping ahead here? Well, the main reason is under subpart G, the traffic congestion measure, these are actually a shared single target specific to our urban area. So TDOT wants us to work on that target with them, come up with an agreed upon target for that. And so since we're doing that process, and they, want to get it in the pipeline, start reviewing it with their folks over the summer, kind of backing off of that October 1 deadline, sort of leads us to now is when we need to work on establishing that target for our local area. That's kind of driving this timeline. And so what I thought we would do is, since we're discussing that one, to go ahead and look at all of the other ones at the same time. So these measures are specific to this roadway network, the National Highway System. That's an important consideration. So roads like, major roads we have, state routes, Lovell Road, Emory Road, those aren't part of this program or under consideration. The performance of those is strictly the interstate system and these principal arterial roads shown here on this map. Things like Kingston Pike is included, Alcoa Highway, Western Avenue, Oak Ridge Highway. So the most significant kind of the U.S. routes for the most part here in the region. So it's important to remember what is involved in that. So these options of whether we quantify a local target for this or just support the state's targets. In the past, we've always supported the state's targets, and that means we're just agreeing to plan and program projects so that they contribute toward accomplishment of the TDOT target. And the primary reason we've done that in the past is really because, again, these funding programs are controlled by TDOT, and those roads I showed there, pretty much 95% of those are state routes. There's a couple of exceptions now, especially with Cumberland Avenue no longer being a state route, James White Parkway. Ed Schaus Drive is part of that because it connects to that intermodal gas tank facility over there. So it's part of it. But for the most part, these are all state routes and the funding programs controlled by TDOT. But we recommend consideration of going ahead and doing local targets, though, for this round. First of all, it's the 3rd round. So by now, part of the reason also was that just, getting the data together and the analysis and so forth. We're still kind of early. We do have access to the data for these to do local targets. This will allow us to formally track our local conditions. We've been working on dashboards with the mobility plan. And so we would probably do an annual report to you guys of how well we're matching these. So a lot of that just makes more sense if you're talking about local numbers than a statewide number. Also, finally here, there is no formal assessment or consequences if we don't meet these targets. So there's really no kind of drawback from that standpoint of not doing our own target. So there are some different approaches that we should look at as sort of philosophically to set targets. And these are from an NCHRP report I show here. It's been a helpful guidance document for me to putting this together. A lot of these measures, I will say, are difficult to specifically quantify what kind of impact you're going to have. You know, if we have a widening of Alcoa Highway, sure, that should improve some of the aspects of reliability. I'll get into that here in a minute. But to directly determine what the number will be is difficult for most of these targets. So these kind of set out other frameworks of how you can think about setting your target. First up here is a realistic or predictive target setting. And Federal Highway kind of steers in this direction of not wanting you to do just a purely aspirational number that would be impossible to achieve, or you can't determine how you'll meet that. So the realistic predictive is more of doing like a trend line on the data, seeing which direction you're going, maybe some factors that might sway that one way or another. Then second on here is aspirational target setting. This would be the viewpoint that you're saying, well, these targets, they should be a goal. We should be motivated to meet in this direction. And we are kind of using that thought process for the safety targets. As you know, earlier this year, we adopted local safety targets, and that's based on a goal from our regional safety plan that we're going to reduce fatalities by 2/3 by 2045. So that's kind of that philosophy there. It also helps avoid the conversation of if we're selecting a target that's getting worse, people are saying, why would you have a goal to get worse on something? So there's that aspect of it. Then finally on here, conservative target setting. This is where the most important thing would be to meet the target. So we're going to set a very low bar for ourselves to make sure we meet this target. Again, that's more of an issue if you have a direct consequence for not meeting the target on you. And also early on, I would say TDOT kind of took this approach. Conservative and realistic sort of go a little bit hand in hand, I would say. And TDOT generally goes in that direction. They do a lot of trend analysis and see, what can we really move the needle on? If we don't think we can move the needle, then let's just keep with that trend, and that way we have a chance to meet the target rather than setting a stable or declining or improving target that we know we most likely won't meet. So these are things to be thinking about as we talk about each of the targets. And then, so these kind of just more of the specific aspects of that, which I kind of get into these as we talk about each target, so I'll probably skip through just different factors to consider. And again, a lot of these do go hand in hand with, you got your baseline and the trends and different assumptions and factors to look at to change the number in one direction. All right, so with each of these that I'm going to get into next here, kind of follow the same template here, define what the measure is and how to calculate it. Go through some data analysis, the historical trends for our area. I'll also show peer city data for all the three other big cities in Tennessee, and a couple I threw in Atlanta and Charlotte just to throw those in there. And then we'll discuss factors, including maybe specific roadway segments contributing and also the projects that are planned. And then finally with the options for each target. And then up front here, I wanted to show this information to show that a lot of the congestion type targets may be somewhat beyond our control with just the large growth that we've seen in our region since 2020. So these are estimates from the Boyd Center at UT. The latest county population estimate for 2025 for each of our 6 counties in the TPO area. So we've had 60,000 almost people in the last 5 years move into the area. So that's like, a couple new Marivilles or Oak Ridges popping up just in the last 5 years. And of course, Knox County is leading the way of the total number there. Loudoun County, percentage-wise, is the greatest increase, 8,600 with a 55,000 starting point. If you compare that to some of the other big cities in Tennessee, I was really kind of shocked to see that total numbers-wise, Knox County is actually a little bit higher than Davidson, Nashville. We're at 31,000. They're at just under 30,000. So that was very surprising to me because you hear about how Nashville, of course, some of the outer counties around Nashville are growing quite a bit too. But Hamilton's sort of in the same boat with us. They're seeing a lot of growth in Chattanooga area. On the flip side, though, Shelby County, Memphis, they've actually lost 20,000 almost population since 2025. And you'll see that reflected in their numbers here in a minute. Okay, so now we're actually moving into the targets themselves. First up is that subpart E, performance of the National Highway System, level of travel time reliability. So the goal behind this measure is that reliability is actually at least as important, if not more important, for folks traveling. This can include separate measures for interstate only and the non-interstate National Highway System. So this gets to the fact of what do you actually have to plan for your travel time every day for your commute for example. And typically, we kind of just put one number down as an annual average. But when you look at the actual day-to-day variation, you have incidents or weather, something like that affects, or holidays on the flip side, where it's much easier. When school's out, I notice a big difference. Travel time to work for me from West Knox County. But this really is what sticks out and what people have to plan around if they want to make sure that they get to, a critical appointment on time. They know on an average day it might take 20 minutes to get there, but they have to plan around those extremes and maybe twice as long. So they want to budget an extra 20 minutes if it's twice as long. So that's kind of how these reliability factors work. So this is the actual methodology is the 80th percent travel time divided by the 50th percent, or the average. And they do this separately for 4 different time periods. You've got kind of the AM peak period, a midday, and a PM peak, and then a weekend, pretty much all day weekend. So they calculate these numbers. This all comes from big data and numbers plotted for every single hour of every day of the year on each roadway segment. So luckily this is all in an online platform where we don't have to crunch the numbers ourselves. It spits this out. But basically, if any one of those 4 periods of time are greater than 1.5, then this segment, it's a all or nothing. It's either reliable or not reliable. It could just be one period throwing it out of whack. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and what we'll talk about here in a minute too. One other important thing with this reliability measure is it can sort of hide an overall congestion increase, like what we would call it's reliably congested. So whether or not people really are concerned with the reliability versus just the day-to-day increase of travel time is something to factor in here. What we used to do, or what we still do for our congestion management process, is more of calculate the travel time at a free flow speed or at posted speed limit. What is that travel time? And compare the actual average travel time to that to see what conditions are for congestion. So the way this doesn't work that way, because you've got your average travel time, which could be increasing along with that 80th percentile travel time. And since this is a ratio, the ratio number doesn't change. It's still around 1.4, 1.5, even though your average daily travel time is significantly increasing over time. So kind of in my mind, this is not necessarily the best measure from that standpoint as far as congestion goes. But again, this is what the Federal Highway Administration has sort of dictated that we look at. So this is the data platform that I pull it from. They provide segment by segment information on the level of travel time. This is for interstates. As folks can imagine, this part of I-40, 75 near Pellissippi is going to show red. Also, a daily bottleneck or, congested area westbound I-40 going into 640 interchange is typically unreliable. So the trend line data back to 2017 for this is actually, we're in the 80s and 90% of the overall network that's considered reliable, which in my mind is not a terrible number. But we see this steady decrease since, of course, 2020 was an outlier with almost no traffic out there during the peak COVID time. Since then, we've been declining. 2025, we did bounce up just a tad from 2024. So that, and I'll show this trend line again when we talk about the actual targets. Comparing to peer cities here, Chattanooga, Nashville, Memphis, and then also Atlanta and Charlotte. So the red columns here mean that city's performing worse than Knoxville. So the only one doing better than us is Memphis. Again, they've had declining population and so forth. They've got a 95% reliable number. If you look at Atlanta, they're terrible. Down here at 62%. So everybody, likes to say we don't want to become Nashville or Atlanta. So we're not there yet, but Nashville is not super far away, as you can see here.
Hey, Mike, I got a question. Can you go back 2 slides? That drop in that chart right there, is there a way to differentiate between work trips and leisure trips? Because I know more people are working at home, after the 2020, 21. I mean, is there any way to analyze that data?
It'd be hard to tease out exactly. I mean, again, this is representative of all those time periods for every day of the year. I'll show here in a minute, how many of those time periods are actually exceeded, kind of some big numbers. I'll get into that. Maybe it gets to it a little bit. So this is the last slide for interstate level travel time reliability. No, I'm sorry. These are the factors for that. I got one more slide for this. The main contribution for our unreliable travel is, of course, the I-40-75 corridor, the subject of the study going on. If you look at that by time period, the biggest problem is in the PM, as you would probably suspect. We don't have any weekend violations, only a handful in the midday. We do have some projects in the works. Loudoun County is supposed to start construction next year. I guess we'll see if that stays on that track, which during construction could cause issues. But we're setting a 4-year target, so if it's done by 2029, then that might be factored in. We do have the other interchanges. The big thing for reliability is we're already doing here, I think, is an invaluable resource, the help trucks and the TPOt Traffic Management Center, to really try to respond to incidents as quickly as possible. That really helps our reliability numbers out. So that's already in place. So then looking at targets for this measure, I kind of laid out these different philosophies here. Like if we wanted to do a policy-based, something like we don't want to get worse than 2021 number. Or if you look at the historical trends, I started with 2021. I didn't go all the way back to that 2017 number because with the 2020 COVID year in there kind of skews things. But if you plot that out, it's definitely trending down pretty low. Another option is say, what is our baseline? The official baseline we also get measured against is year 2025 is 83%. So we could kind of use that as a starting point and pivot off of that. And then there's if you look at the actual data segment by segment, you can look and see which ones are actually close to that 1.5 number and might trip over, or on the flip side, or just above, and we might be able to improve to get under. And that leads to a range of 77 to 87%. That we could change those from reliable to unreliable, and so forth. And then the model is unfortunately not really applicable to setting a target here. So I'll just say, any initial thoughts on a direction to go with this. And again, we don't have to decide today, but and I'll follow up by email. If it would be helpful, we can talk about it as a staff and come up with a staff recommendation if you guys would prefer also.
I guess a couple things I would ask, are you going to try to do this in-house, or is this going to be something that's going to be contracted out?
No, it's in-house.
So cost versus time,
Yeah.
what are the benefits of us doing this in-house, doing our own versus, since there's no penalties associated with using TDOT's numbers, what are the benefits of us doing this in-house? And having our own.
Or you mean local or?
Yeah. I mean, as far as not just local, but the benefits overall of us doing this versus just using the state. Kind of give me.
I think the biggest benefit is just the transparent, or, to bring this information to light and discuss it. It's, again, hard to rally around a statewide number as to what that actually means. This would be a process where we report back to you, what is our condition? How are we tracking with what we would like to see as our target? Again, it's just to bring that all to light and have more opportunity for discussion of how we might be able to hopefully affect.
So is it the long-term goal
performance.
to utilize this information for decision-making, or is it just for informational purposes?
I'd say a little bit of both. I mean, again, we don't have direct control over the funding pots, but hopefully we can influence TDOT as they select projects, and we can bring that information to bear. But it's more about just, again, the transparency and accountability aspect of what we're doing, I think.
It gives you a better. Got my computer over. Again, like you said, it gives you a better regional perspective. And again, if you're identifying issues, obviously that's the goal of this, is to be able to address those issues. So if you if you see some in the region, obviously you can request additional funding through additional grants or programs to address those specific items. I mean, that's the goal. If your number is obviously going up, you got to show how you're addressing those. So again, I think the key is it gives you just a better regional perspective versus the whole statewide. Obviously, we know there's a lot of anomalies there across the state. When just
So
looking
you're
at
saying
that.
you're going to listen to us, is what you're saying?
Hopefully.
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Well,
All
I
right.
always do.
All right. Thank
All right. I'll try to move quickly. I know we still got a lot to go. So that was the interstate aspect. We also look at the non-interstate national highway system. These are really kind of, I think, skewed by other factors, and it's hard to measure this. The trend is sort of mostly a flat line up until last year where we dropped. But again, actually last year matched back in 2017 and 2018. So I don't think I can necessarily have a good explanation about what this trend line is. And quickly here, how we compare with the others. I'm going to skip over that. So kind of the main contributors are highlighted in red on this map here. One of the issues I noticed with this data is that the segmentation in the data itself is causing problems with skewing the data. These segments out here of US 70 and US 321 Loudoun County, these are one segment that are multiple miles long. And if it's over that number, these are all weighted by length and traffic volume. So it kind of skews that number. Whereas some of the segments are literally just a few hundred feet at a traffic signal. And of course, at traffic signals is where you're going to see the problems with the travel times fluctuating a lot. So this measure, I think, is one that doesn't really merit a lot of time spent on trying to suss out what's going on. What I'm interested to see, we have a lot of these upcoming ATMS projects, City of Knoxville on Kingston Pike, Broadway, Chapman Highway. Those are all National Highway System routes. Oak Ridge is continuing to do that. Illinois Avenue is one of those. Maryville and Alcoa are working on another phase. So those hopefully would help this measure, and we can maybe try to track the improvements from that. Alcoa Highway, of course, is under construction, and we'll wrap up that one segment to the north hopefully next fall. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Charles D. Severs Boulevard is on there. I know you've brought up as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's the red right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Wanted to make sure it was on there.
Okay, yeah, that one.
Drove it yesterday.
I'll talk about it here later too. So these are kind of the same format as that last one for interstate, at the baseline, trend lines, and all of that. So kind of as we haven't really talked about this as a staff together, but I'm kind of leaning towards this option of the baseline and then kind of looking at, do we think it's going up or down, or is there specific projects we think might influence that? So kind of the default here is the baseline number and trying to build a target off of that. It's kind of what I would lean toward. I know I'll go ahead and skip ahead, and maybe we can circle back on things if we still have time, but I do want to move forward. Next on the list is the freight movement on just the interstate system. This is known as the Truck Travel Time Reliability, TTTR. This is similar to the last one I just mentioned, except it's the 95th percentile divided by the 50th. And just for the truck speeds, those are tracked separately. And they add one more time period to those 4 I mentioned earlier. And this one's different, where you just plot the maximum number of all these 5 time periods. You just pick the worst, the maximum, rather than trying to do that. Is it over 1.5? And if so, it gets contributed to that total reliability percentage. So it's related to the last measure, but a little slightly different way to calculate it. Similar kind of scenario here on the interstates. We again have that I-40/75 West Corridor showing up here. Also 640 and that other part of I-40 I talked about with truck travel time reliability. This has been a steady increase since 2017. We did improve a tad from 2024 to 2025. Comparing that to peer cities, again, we're pretty much better than all of them except for Memphis again. Atlanta's well over 2.16 versus our 1.65. So I think anybody that's driven Atlanta knows, especially around the belt down there, Beltway. So this I've color coded by kind of the level of maximum. There's some of these segments that are greater than 5.0, shown in purple here, especially around the Pellissippi Parkway interchange. So I think the highest one is over 6, like 6.4. So that's saying it takes you 6.4 times longer than the average in that 95th percentile. So what I call extreme unreliable. Same projects that I kind of mentioned with the other one, of course. I did also notice, though, that only 46% over 46% of the segments have over 1.5, only exceeded for one of those time periods. So this doesn't seem to be a pervasive issue, not occurring all those 5 time periods. If we can work on that one time period, and particularly the PM afternoon peak period is the worst. If we can somehow target that, we could bring these numbers down. So these are the target setting factors to look at for this one. Again, if we plot the trend just back starting in 2021, that number shoots pretty high out here. If you straight line that number out, it gets up to 1.82 going by the trend line. Baseline number is 1.65. Again, if we could somehow bring those extreme ones down, it would really affect this number. Not to say that we can have much control over that at this point. Again, the West Knox I-40/75 corridor is really the key factor here. Until that gets addressed, I think we're just kind of treading water to a large degree on this. So any thoughts about a potential target here? Do we want to stay potentially more conservative and say we keep tracking forward with no immediate relief in sight, or try to hang closer to the baseline? I guess if anybody online wants to chime in too, I don't want to pause here for a minute. I know it's a lot of numbers. It's hard to just throw out something, I guess.
Well, like you said, that's the same period for the vehicles too. So I don't know if one's impacting the other or they're just all stuck together That's causing the corridor, so.
I mean, I think as you look at this data, we're going to look at you as staff to kind of lead us
Yeah.
on the righteous path here forward.
I don't want to, what's the word?
There's no wrong answer though. I mean, I can, basically, I think time will tell is what I would say from staff. As we go through this, you're going to look at this every year, right? Or is
Right.
it every 4 years?
Well, actually, every 2 years, there's kind of a check-in point. At the midpoint, we can adjust our targets.
Okay.
But our goal would be to bring this, every year, track the information and show you how we're trending and that type of thing.
So would we be able to would you make recommendations and changes every year or would it be every
No.
2 years?
It'd be every 2 years. A
Well, I
new
think-
new 4-year period would start. Again, that's under the assumption that this still carries forward in the new transportation bill as well, which we haven't really heard anything specific to performance measures, but I assume it'll be carried forward. All right, so now moving into the fourth one here, CMAC program.
Mike,
Oh, yeah.
sorry.
No.
I'm showing up as I'm showing up as this weird JJ number, but this is Mike Lozier with.
Oh, yeah,
Good
thanks.
morning, everyone. Maybe I haven't been hearing it in the discussion, but are you at this point? Do you have the state's recommended? Do you have TDOT's recommended targets?
No. So this, TDOT will be setting a statewide target for these, and that's still under development. I know we had one working group meeting,
Okay. Okay.
but I don't think any numbers have been finalized. But that's still under development. I'm kind of jumping out ahead of you guys, mainly just because of that time frame and how our meetings line up. I know we don't have another opportunity to discuss this next May. We have a lot of other things on our agenda, so kind of want to get
Okay,
ahead of-
that's
yeah.
fine.
Well,
Yeah, Stephanie and I are on board here learning the process because there's a transition going on within our
Right.
department. But I was just curious of the timing of and whether you were comparing this list of potentials to whatever TDOT had developed. But that's okay. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I don't know when those will be finalized, but if I have that information, I'll share that out with the group as well when we send this information by email prior to the May meeting, where we actually hope to maybe adopt some targets. Really, the only one we need to adopt now is the subpart G, which I'm getting into now. These are the shared target with TDOT, and so we will want to discuss these with TDOT before we finalize anything, make sure you guys are on board with our methodology and okay with. I think you guys would, in the past, kind of defer to us largely on this since it's our urban area specific. So the first one here, peak hour excessive delay. This is on the National Highway System, but only within the urbanized area of the Knoxville urban area. And excessive delay is defined as the travel at 60% of the posted speed limit. So if a road's a 60 miles per hour, that's anything at 36 miles per hour or below. And so all this traffic that is failing that measure gets tabulated up, aggregated together, and that total hours is divided by the population to derive this. This is on all the other ones, we're setting a 4-year target for the conditions in 2029. This one, however, we have to have a 2-year for 2027 and a 4-year target. And again, they're shared with TDOT. We both adopt the same numbers. Again, this is just kind of calculate how the calculation actually works. Each time period's plotted, and if it's higher or lower than that threshold of travel time, this one has one segment over, so that number gets added to the equation. I won't go into too much detail there. Here's the trend data, and we were right around 9, 10 toward 11. 2025, we did spike, I would say. Got quite a bit worse, up to 14 hours from 11.1. The same, well, pretty much almost everything here is red, showing a problem with delay. When you compare us to the peer cities, Nashville is actually the worst of all, even worse than Atlanta in this measure here. So it's good to see we're well below where Nashville is. And we're doing better than everyone except Chattanooga and Memphis, if you compare all those. But Charlotte does surprisingly well, I would say, looking at their number versus their size. So the factors influencing this value, I've kind of highlighted the ones that have gotten a lot worse in 2025 compared to the previous 4-year average. The corridors that seem to be increasing the most are, the ones you would kind of guess. The I-40 corridor, also all of Pellissippi, I-140, Illinois Avenue. That's a continual bottleneck we see going out of Oak Ridge. Catherine's favorite corridor up here, the Charles G. Sievers leading into Oak Ridge, pops out, Alcoa Highway and US 129 bypass. So those are the corridors we need to focus on trying to improve. We do have those same projects I just kind of highlighted here. Are you going to say something, Jim? Or
Yeah, I was going to ask, and I know you said it was on 10-year plan. Can you give me a little more details on that I-75 and Loudon from where to where?
Yeah. It's from the US 321, exit 81, up to the split. It will be widened from 4 to 6 lanes. So adding another lane each direction there. Yeah. Yeah.
When that widening is done on I-75, does that include any, because apparently this is a factor, relocation of the weigh station?
Yeah, I think I included weigh stations on here. I mean, we're still trying to find out, and that's part of the Pell study too, is looking at, I know weigh in motion is another thing that might help a little bit, but ultimately we need to move the weigh station completely out of that corridor. And I think TDOT, do you have any updates on where that's, maybe we'll get an update next month.
Yeah, I don't, but I know we've been looking at that for some time, and they've tried to look at it like further out on 40, but then you got to capture, what's coming up 75 and what's coming on 40. So obviously that's been the challenge, but that's the latest I've heard as well. But I'll make a note.
I think I agree with Jack more and more as I coming from Nashville, and you hit that. It's just an upgrade, continual upgrade eastbound. And then the weigh station doesn't help any right there. So
that kind of brings back the whole Watt Road interchange too. If they're gonna do that improvement to 321 from there up to the split,
yeah,
wouldn't it make more sense to somehow combine those two projects? What's kind of the thinking there? I don't know. Is that something that? I know me and you've talked about. We've got a little road issue there next to the fireworks stand, which there's like a little no man's land there. But I hope we're looking at that kind of as a dovetail project.
I think it was an opportunity for TDOT to get that Loudon section because it technically was considered rural. They put it under their rural program, even though somewhat urban really. But so they got the money for that widening project, kind of by calling it rural widening. But it should happen about the same time as the Watt Road interchange, roughly in that time frame. But yeah.
Yeah, on the rural thing real quick, I had this question. I've had this question this week from a couple other MPOs. So in the original legislation under TMA, which was 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. Anyway, that legislation ties all that rural terminologies where they identified pretty much everything outside of the urban cores is identified as, so they identified that funding towards those rural, what they refer to as rural interstates. So that has nothing to do with the functional classification or anything. It's basically that legislation identified all of those outside of the urban cores, and they identified, those were called like congestion. Those are referred to as congestion within the urban cores, and then everything outside of those were all identified as rural. And again, that's in that original legislation. Had to dig into that yesterday for another MPO. So
Okay.
Just thought I would
It's sort of a little loophole.
fill
that
you
we have.
in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is kind of get a little confusing. So I just want to clarify.
All right, so then some target setting considerations for this one. You look at historical trend back to 2021, that's going to shoot us out up here towards 16.5 for 2029. Do we want to go that high? Is that, again, that issue of do we want to say it's getting that much worse here? it's kind of hard to say whether this 2025 number is just an outlier and we come back more toward this range, or is this the new trend, in fact? And I mean, traffic's getting worse, I see out there. So maybe it's just the first point of what we expect to see moving forward. I will say the previous target we set, we did not meet at all. The 2025 target, we adjusted at the 2-year period. It was at 10.8. We adjusted up to 12.0, but we still missed that target when we got that big 14 number again for last year. I did look at this where, those ATMS projects and the Alcoa Highway, I kind of selected those out. I looked at the traffic total numbers and just kind of assumed a 15% reduction of delay based on those projects, just kind of a round number. If we do that, that does actually chop off 0.5 hours. That's kind of a way, this measure does lend itself toward possibly quantifying a little bit more than those reliability ones are, because it does directly, the delay numbers are easier to track than a ratio again. We can also use the travel demand model to some degree. I looked at our travel demand model, and it's 2 years between 2026 and 2035. It's kind of showing an increase of delay close to 2% per year. If you factor that in, just add that on to the baseline, we kind of wind up with these numbers at the 2-year point, 14.5 and then 15.0. So again, another way to try to quantify what's going on. So some different things to think about here. If there's anything that jumps out at anybody, let us know. Otherwise, we can kind of talk more as a staff and come up with a number to let you react to and vote on. Everybody will be getting ready to vote on stuff soon here, so I'm not hearing anything, so we'll move forward. Okay, the other part of this subpart G is called percent of non-SOV, non-single occupant vehicle. This is a totally different kind of measure than those ones I've talked about so far that deal with travel time and so forth. This gets at congestion from the other standpoint of, hey, if we reduce travel demand, get people using things besides single occupant cars, we can improve congestion. So there's different ways. The easiest way to calculate this is from the Census ACS commuting. This only gets at commuting work trips, not overall travel, but kind of as a proxy for that. These are, so you calculate this in the census, it gives you the by mode numbers broken out here, different modes, and when you subtract that from 100%, we're at 23.9. This will make more sense in this chart. On the trends, so 2019, these are 5-year ACS, so it's an average. 2019 is really 2015 through 2019 and so forth. So of course, everyone's well aware after COVID, the work from home really shot up. Prior to any 2020 being in the average, we were at 5% work from home. Last year's ACS, we're up to 14% almost. I did also note here, we've got drove alone, decreased of course because of the mainly telecommuting, but our carpooling numbers are declining a little bit from 7.8% down to 7.1%. The others are pretty small percentages, walking and public transportation. Those are kind of holding steady. I guess other means with things, I guess bicycling maybe. I'm not sure what else would be other, but you can also compare this to peer cities. I thought this was kind of interesting. I know this is just for that most recent 5-year ACS period. The Atlanta, Charlotte, they have a lot higher percentage of non-SOV, but they have much higher working. These bottom 3 rows are kind of the percentages from some of the high ones above. Like Chattanooga is doing a lot better than us on carpooling. They're at 9.1% versus our 7. Of course, in Atlanta and Charlotte, they have more public transit options, rail and so forth. But that percent work from home really sticks out in the bigger cities. We're at 13.9% again. Nashville's over 20. and the other two, Atlanta and Charlotte, 22%. So more than 1 in 5 people are working from home in those, and it's probably largely due to the amount of traffic congestion they're trying to avoid, and the type of jobs also that allow you to work from home. In this one, I think we can do a pretty good job of calculating a number based on so the 5-year average, the ACS comes out also in 1-year data. So the red line here is the 1-year ACS data, and that's where you can really see this spike occur in 2020 because of work from home. It's interesting that we already started increasing in 2019 a little bit from around 16%, but this is the first 5-year averages now moving forward where COVID's totally baked into that 5-year average. The last year still had 2019 number in there. But moving forward now, everything's post-COVID or with COVID. So I'm proposing that we just pick this number from 2024, the 1-year value, plug that in for the 5-year unknowns moving forward, and that actually calculates a 2 and 4-year target value of 24.6%. So our baseline number, again, is 23.9. So that's kind of my thought process here. Gives a reasonable number. If anybody has any other methods they'd like to throw out there. Obviously, I think we've kind of leveled off on the work from home aspect, from the spike that went up. And I think we're kind of treading somewhat level now. Some people are actually going back to work more, potentially a little bit, but I don't know. Any other thoughts here? Yeah, I mean, I can see that. TPOt, are you guys going back to work? Nashville, or for a while? You only work 1 day a week in the office, or 3? Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly in the ACS how that shows up, because it just asks you what you actually did that week or whatever. Yeah.
Specify working in the office, just not working.
Most of my work's on the road. Today's an office day for me with you guys.
So we're getting close to the end here. Actually, the last one I don't have numbers for today, but I'll describe briefly how it works. The last one on the list, subpart H, CMAQ on-road mobile emissions targets. So this applies to the CMAQ funding we get, and only for projects that are in these shaded counties. The ozone area is, again, Knox County, Blount County, small part of Anderson, around Bull Run. And then PM 2.5 is Anderson, Knox, Blount, Loudon, and the small part of Roan around the Kingston plant. So in the past, TPOt, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. How are you calculating Bull Run? Because it's not operational at this point.
Well, that's true. I mean, but when the area was designated, it was still running, so they wanted to include that in the non-attainment area. And we're stuck with that as a maintenance area for 20 years after we get back into attainment. So until 2030. 2031, it's getting closer. In the past, TPOt had taken CMAQ in-house and done a statewide call for projects, so it was really hard to set a target for this because we didn't even know if we would get projects selected. Now, there is the PM 2.5 area, since Knoxville is the only area in the state subject to that standard. That's the only place they can spend those dollars, and Stacy can chime in if I'm speaking out of turn. So somewhat, it's not necessarily official policy, but it's kind of coming back into our realm that we can do. We need to look at what exactly funding we have versus we know we have cost overruns coming down the pike for other projects. So we hope to have, though, a pot of money, and we have already selected 3 projects in the new TIP. Once it becomes active, these in fiscal year 29 are not going to go forward, but the Maryville-Alcoa upgrade to their system can start to move forward. So we've already selected 3 projects. We hope to potentially select more. But this measure is simply just calculating that emissions from those projects and setting the target based on that. So this one's directly quantifiable in that respect, although I will say it's kind of a fictitious number that we're deriving here with estimating these emission reductions. It's all a lot of assumptions and so forth. There's no way to directly measure these emissions, but so we'll be, we still need to work with TDOT on establishing the numbers in the baseline. And also, I'll probably need to reach out to these agencies before I calculate the emission reductions to get more specifics on exactly what's going on. So that'll be happening over the next couple of weeks here, and we'll send that out. So this is the last summary slide here. Again, we're recommending to go ahead and set local targets for all of these PM3 measures, the subpart E, F, G, and H. The main thing, though, right now is the subpart G, the one we share with TDOT, is really driving the timeline. We could potentially just, if you're not comfortable moving forward with targets, we can wait on the others. We actually have until 180 days after October of this year, technically, to set those, and we could follow the state targets once they're official and that type of thing. But we have to set our local area, urban area specific targets for subpart G. And again, TDOT would like us to kind of help move that forward on their timeline. So my thought would be to do like a polling sort of thing, send maybe a Google form with a multiple choice for each of these, and let you guys each individually weigh in on targets, and we'll say what our staff recommendation for each one is. Get all of that voting information gathered and report back at May 12th and see where we are there, and see if you're ready to adopt those targets or not. Again, there's no consequence for missing targets. We are required in the mobility plan and TIP for a mobility plan, describe the progress made toward achievement since the last update. TIP is describe how the investments in the TIP are making progress. So it's hard, again, to quantify that directly. But in my mind, it's much easier to discuss these things when we have a local target to talk about rather than saying the statewide number.
And there's enough of us here. I think we need to discuss it. But if you're willing to do the work, I think it benefits our region to look at these numbers locally. I mean, it kind of sold me on it, is explaining that.
Okay.
But again,
yeah, that's good. That's what
you're
we
creating
wanted
more work for yourself,
right? So, either way, though, we have to explain ourselves, and to me, it's easier to again talk about a local number than saying why we're supporting a statewide number for these. We set up this dashboard type of thing with the mobility plan. It's really under development still in my mind. But we're continuing to work on that. We'll roll that out. It'll be a way that we can share this information with you as we move forward too. So I think that was it. Oh wait, we do have one last other update here real quick, but if everyone wants to.
A couple of calendar updates. The 29th TPO Executive Board meeting is canceled, so the next technical committee will be May the 12th, and the Executive Board meeting subsequently May the 27th.
And I have a couple other things. If we approve these, that commits Mike to working here for some time. You can't just turn right around and put in your resume after we get done, or your notice. But I did want to let y'all know we had a little bit of sad news. Jonah is departing us. In fact, this is his last week. Him and his wife are, if you didn't know, he graduated from Appalachian State. So him and his wife are headed back over to Boone, North Carolina. So I'm always mixed about that. It's sad to see him go, but if it's best for your family, and we wish you all the luck there, and we appreciate all the work you did for us. So stay in touch and everything. So we'll miss you on that. Any other things or whatever?
I thought there was
something
else.
Like you said, our May meeting's got to be really jammed, so be sure you can come.
The big thing there again, TDOT hopefully coming back to share updates on the I-40 study for that. So,
guess that's it.
Yep. Thank you.